Hi, this is Gail with Experiences You Should Have, your how-to guide for amazing experiences. And what's interesting is that I have asked many people in the world, what is that one experience that can be replicated that you would want to share? And almost every time, the response always has something to do with nature. And when I reached out to an old childhood friend from middle school, Katie Beth Gill, and asked her what was that one experience that she would want to share, she replied with kayaking in Greenland. Now, Katie Beth Gill is a very seasoned traveler. She has been to 63 countries. She is a nurse with Doctors Without Borders, and she has experienced so much in the world. So when you get the recommendation to do something from Katie Beth Gill, you know it is a high recommendation. I highly suggest following her on her adventures on Instagram, Katie Beth Gill, and you can also check out her blog, katiebethgill.com. I am so excited about this topic because recently we just did an episode on going to Antarctica, which is definitely on my list. But it turns out kayaking in Greenland in icebergs is half the cost of Antarctica. It's still expensive, but hey, you could get out in the water and experience this beautiful form of ice and serenity and half the cost. So that's how I see it here. And Katie Beth Gill is going to share about her experience, and we'll get into logistics, costs, best time to go, because there really is a best time to go to Greenland, and how to make this experience happen for yourself. Enjoy. We are talking about kayaking through Greenland.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just this like massive country on the map, and you know it's cold there. You know there's ice there, and
you know nothing else.
I'm at a loss.
Yeah.
I mean, what is Greenland like?
Yeah, so Greenland it's completely unique. I mean, it was my 63rd country to go to.
Wow.
And you know what it's like when you travel a lot, that, you know, you can kind of like, every country is unique, but it always seems to have a relative of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you've been to India, you can say, oh, it reminded me a lot of Nepal, you know, like they're different, but there's a familiarity. You get to Greenland and you just go, nope. I mean, there's nothing that it reminds you of. It's a giant sheet of ice. When you fly in from Iceland, you just fly and fly and fly over ice, and you kind of have a moment where you just go, what are we thinking? We have not flown over any civilization. It's just been massive amounts of ice. You start like kidding yourself into thinking like, I could join NASA after this. Like I am ready for, like, you know, to go to Mars after this experience. It was so remote, you know. I mean, I had no concept of how large Greenland was. To be honest, I had never really thought of Greenland that much until we decided to go, and it's massive. It's like the size of like the lower 48 United States. It's huge.
Wow.
But with like 57,000 people in it. So it's very sparsely populated.
That is incredible. Like on the entire continent,
the entire thing,
country of Greenland. Wow.
Yeah, the entire thing, 57,000 people.
Whoa.
So it's not crowded, I'll say that.
No, if you need some space, this might be a good place to go.
Yeah, if you're not into traffic, Greenland's your place.
Right, the complete opposite of Bangkok.
Right. exactly. Which, when you live in New Delhi, going to Bangkok seems like Bangkok is to New Delhi as Greenland is to the United States, I guess.
Whoa.
Bangkok felt
Whoa.
very laid back to me in comparison to New Delhi.
Crazy. Crazy. Okay,
Yeah,
so why did you go to Greenland?
I went to Greenland because my buddy, Matt the pharmacist, and I had been trying to plan a trip together for forever and just kept missing each other. And he was in Europe, and I was like, that's it. Like, I have those same 2 weeks off. We're going to go do a trip together. And so I kicked around a few ideas, like, northern Afghanistan, to which he very quickly, like, denied that option. um, so at first we thought about go to Norway, because I really wanted to go kayaking. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to be in nature. And we just kind of like started looking at the pricing of being in Norway for 2 weeks. And I just finally called him and I said, listen, for like $1,000 more, we can just go to Greenland. And like, that's just got to be the edge of the universe. So let's do that. And so we did. Just
Beautiful.
said, let's do that. It's worth the extra money to really get away from civilization. So that's what we did.
Okay, so you went to Greenland with your buddy with the intention of going kayaking in Greenland.
Yeah.
So
And we
how
did.
long were you planning on going kayaking in Greenland? And did you think you would return?
Like, how long did the trip planning take, or how long were we planning on being in Greenland?
Yeah, how long were you planning on being in Greenland, or how long did you stay there?
Yeah, we were actually only there a week.
Okay.
We had planned on staying longer, but then we figured out really quickly that the flights that were in and out of Greenland for some reason were only on Tuesdays.
Oh,
So, like, for some reason, our trip needed to be like on the common denominator of Tuesdays. And so we were like, okay, well, we can either stay a week or we have to stay like another week
right.
to like get in and out on these flights. So we decided to do a week in Greenland and then do some time in Iceland on either side.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So logistically, to get there, you have to either go through Copenhagen or you have to go through Iceland. So that choice was pretty easy for us. That we were like, yeah, like we'll go to Iceland for a few days on either side and, fill out the time.
And I heard if you fly Iceland Air, you can take a free stopover in Iceland if it's 7 days or less.
Yeah. And so I did that a few years ago on WOW Airlines, which
Uh-huh.
boasts on being Iceland's most punctual airline, which I think is just a very funny tagline to have.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
and they're kind of like the Ryanair of Iceland now.
Got it.
Yeah, like I flew from London to Boston for like $190 one way, that's just ridiculous.
Well, I was just in London and I got $500 round trip tickets from Seattle to London and back.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah. It was
That's
fantastic.
amazing.
Right.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I will say flying to Iceland was the most economical part of the entire trip.
Oh, okay. Cool. Cool.
Yeah, this is not a cheap trip. For anyone who's sitting here thinking, man, that sounds like it's for me, get ready to eat a lot of ramen on like before you go, because it is not a cheap trip at all.
So you spent a week in Greenland, you stopped over in Iceland, you went kayaking in Greenland, which we're going to get a little bit more into, but how much
Absolutely.
did this trip cost you?
Just shy of $5,000.
Okay. All right. You know what?
Yeah.
It's cheaper than Antarctica.
And that, I know that sounds like a weird way to pitch it, but that's how I pitched it to myself. And I mean, like we very few of us choose to save money on purpose, right? Like in our age group, we seem to be terrible at saving money.
Right.
Like if you're not spending it on travel, it just seems like you're just spending it on other things you can't remember. So, I mean, the way I justify it to myself is, I don't buy expensive purses or, other things, I guess, that some people really enjoy. And so my thing is I'd rather spend $5,000 on kayaking in Greenland. So
I love it. I
what
love
we
it.
did.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
don't spend money on
absolutely.
purses and all that crap either. It's
Nope.
I feel like life should be experience focused. I mean, hence the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Hey.
exactly.
Hey.
I
Yeah.
am much more experience based than I am things based.
It means we
So
are true millennials, man.
yeah. Does it? Oh
Yeah.
no. Uh, I'm going to go ahead and pull an Eliza Schlesinger and say I'm an elder millennial because I
That's
am like, we're on the older end of that demographic.
that is correct. That means we are older and wiser and
Exactly. I'm an elder millennial.
elder millennials here. But I want to hear more about kayaking in Greenland. Like, how many
Absolutely.
days did you spend kayaking in Greenland, and how did you go about planning this trip? And what was it like? Tell me the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, like we went there to go do a lot of different stuff. So it wasn't just the kayaking, but that was definitely the best part that we did. So,
Cool.
we did some glacier tours, we did a lot of hiking, that type of stuff. There, it is not hard to figure out once you get there how to do this stuff because there's literally just like one company there that has the kayaks that you can go and get them from. And again, like not cheap. So if you want to go kayaking, they have like these morning and evening options that you can go out there, and it's about $300 for every 5 hours that you take a kayak out.
Wow.
So yeah, so we were based out of the mainland, and anytime we'd go like out on the ocean, like we like would just rent these kayaks and go out there and do that. And again, it's pricey, but it's completely and totally worth it. I mean, you're going through the ice fjord, and so you're kind of like just kayaking along, and it feels like you've run over like a very large dog, but it's just a like giant chunk of ice in the water that you've gone
Wow.
over. Yeah, and you're going through glaciers and icebergs and stuff, and some of these icebergs that you're just casually passing by are just like the insignificant icebergs that are 60 feet tall.
Right.
So
Wow.
yeah, you just go by them and people are like, oh, those aren't even the big ones.
That's
You're just like,
insane.
oh, right, yeah. And yeah, and so you can rent from these companies. Like I said, it's very expensive, but I mean, to their defense, like it's pretty involved. It's not even wetsuit kayaking because the water's so cold. It's dry suit kayaking. So, it's,
Could you
yeah,
rent the dry suit where
yes.
you got the kayak?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like this one company that was there. We were on the West Coast in a town called Ilulissat, and that's where you can fly into on Air Iceland, into Ilulissat. And again, like this town is like one of their larger towns in Greenland. It is
Uh-huh.
not big. Like we're talking a couple thousand people. It's not large.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, I think there's like maybe one or two hotels there, and then like the hostel that we stayed in. It's not a large metropolitan area, and so like they have like the one main drag on in the town, and there's just this like place there with all these kayaks just propped up on a fence, and you're like, oh, that's the place that rents kayaks.
Okay.
Like
Great. Great.
right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for people I had never gone dry suit kayaking before. I'd always done the wetsuits or just, like tropical
Right.
endeavors where you didn't eat anything at all. Um, it's very similar to what I think astronauts go through because you have like your dry fit stuff on first, and then you have on like a fleece onesie, which is so tempting to steal, like so much. I wanted to steal it so badly. And then you like pull the dry suit on top of it, which I felt like I needed, I don't know, like a minor in physics to get into it. Cause like, there's all these like rubber
Uh-huh.
parts and it's crazy. And then like the neoprene gloves. And I mean, cause if water freezes at 32 degrees, this water must be like 32.1. I mean, it is not warm at all.
Wow. Wow. Now I
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
dry suit and it I use it for scuba diving, but
Oh,
it
great.
it feels like it's cutting off some circulation sometimes at my neck. And then when I'm in water, it feels better. How did it feel kayaking in this dry suit?
Yeah. So I kind of felt like I was just being like lightly choked during the entire time that you would use it. And after a
Okay.
while, you would kind of forget about it. But like when I first put it on, I was like, I feel like I'm just being slowly choked out by this very like subtle, way in the suit.
Yeah.
But once you like get out on the water, the views are so amazing that you forget about it. But yeah, when you first put it on, there is that sensation of, oh, I might die here. But like not by drowning, but just by trying to wear the suit.
Right, right. How did
And
she
the
die? It was a dress.
right when was not in the water, just lightly choked to death.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And I had never been in a dry suit before. So like, they let you get out of the kayaks at the end and like swim in the dry suits and stuff. It's a very weird experience. That's a very odd sensation.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was new for me. Very
Yeah.
new for me.
I always have like a hose of air connected to mine so I can add in air to kind of warm me up. But you
Oh,
probably didn't have
cool.
that.
We did it. And so it does this kind of like vacuum thing where it like sucks down on you.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah, like they tell you to get all the air out when you put
Right.
the dry suit on, right? And so when you're in the water, you have this misconception that you're getting wet because the water's like closing in on you. And at first, I'm not gonna say I panicked, but at first I was like, I'm not doing this right because I'm getting wet. And they're like, no, no, trust us, you are not getting wet. And it wasn't until I got the thing off, I was like, oh, they were actually correct. They knew what they were talking about.
All right. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
still dry.
You stay dry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But yeah,
so were you on a guided tour or were you guys just out kayaking by yourselves?
we went on a guided tour, and I am really glad we did. You have like the options to be able to do this just to go solo. I am really glad we went on the guided tour because what I was not appreciative of at first is how dangerous those icebergs and glaciers are. Like they are
Mhm.
really dangerous. And I think, all of the kayaking I've ever done has never had that element to it before. Like your biggest risk in the kayaking I've done before has been, you know, getting rolled and not being able to get up, or rattlesnakes or something like
Right.
that. But I've never had to deal with ice before as a hazard. And it was real. I was so glad that we had a guide because they really knew, like, the channels you need to take to the ice, but also like how close you could get to the different icebergs and glaciers because there is this danger that if it calves, you know,
Uh-huh.
it's not just that the falling ice might hit you, but it can cause like kind of like a small tidal wave and roll you, which is
Whoa.
not great, right? And so there's lots of floating ice, and so if you were to roll, it wouldn't just be that you would be rolled, in like 35-degree water or whatever, but it also might be that you could like roll and hit something. So I was very glad we went with the guide, definitely.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
have people rolled while kayaking through icebergs on Greenland and could they
You
survive
know,
this cold water?
what's amazing? And again, this is something I did not know about Greenland. Apparently, kayaks like were kind of like this type of kayaking was like invented there, which I did not know that.
Wow.
So they have these crazy traditions of like all like every year they have these like big contests of like the traditional type of Greenlandic kayaking where like they go out in the water and they demonstrate different types of rolls and that type of stuff. So I mean, I think that in that area, surprisingly, people are very familiar with how to maneuver a kayak. And they even show you like they'll show you like kind of like what a traditional old school Greenlandic kayak looks like, kind of like the wood and that type of stuff. And so I don't think that people who go out like with a guide and stuff and are safe about it have had any issues. But definitely, since there is a tradition of people going out in these kayaks. I'm sure there have been people that have experienced injuries at some point in them, but I think your risk of going with a guide is very, very low.
Got it. Now,
Yeah.
what did this water look like, and what did the icebergs look like?
They were so interesting that they all have very individualistic characteristics. It kind of reminded me of one time we went like out in the desert in Morocco, and like we went like out on camels, and we would go past like the giant sand dunes, and like the nomadic people there knew all of the sand dunes and kind of knew like their personalities. Like they would say things like, "Oh, that one will shift underneath you," or "That one's been growing more," and like they could kind of read it. And I found that like when we talked to the people who did this a lot, like the guides, they seemed to understand the icebergs in the same way, which I thought was very interesting.
That is
like
interesting.
Yeah, they would refer to it as if though it was like an animal, I guess, or like it was a living creature. They would say things like, "Oh yeah, the other day he had this beautiful tint of blue to him," and da da da. And so it was very, very cool to hear how they would like describe them. And when you went through it, you were able to appreciate how individual all of that ice is. Like it's not just ice, they have the different shapes, different textures, depending on the density. Like you could get like the white ice, which is older, and then they would have like that what they call black ice, but that could have this like really pretty sapphire blue like veining through the white ice. The water, I was so surprised, almost had like in some parts like almost like a Caribbean blue quality to it, but not warm at all.
Cold.
Yeah, it was like getting dumped into like a Van Gogh painting almost. All the different blues with the different textures and the swoops of navies and turquoise, and like sometimes when the sky would have clouds going through it, the glaciers would turn like almost like a periwinkle purple color, which I really loved. They were all different. Like it just constantly, while you're out on the water, they're shifting and changing colors, and just a kaleidoscope of blue going on the whole time. It's so worth $5,000.
Wow.
So worth it.
This just sounds like a true experience for your eyes. I mean,
it's for all your senses. Like you can hear the glaciers calving, and it sounds like thunder. You can see like little seals popping up, and sometimes there were whales that would go by, with the tails coming out of the water, and that just made like your blood pump really fast. So magical, right? So
yeah.
It is. Yeah. And then if you go with a guided tour, they like to show people like the difference between the different ices. So like they'll carve off like white ice and the black ice. And then with the black ice, they'll pour Baileys on top of it and pass it out to everyone to experience. So
beautiful.
Also your tasting gets to have like a sensation as well.
That is beautiful. Being able to experience all of the senses all around icebergs in Greenland. I mean, that sounds incredible. Truly incredible.
It's truly unique. Like I said, it was my 63rd country. And so, you travel all the time. I know you get this. Like after a while, it takes a lot to get you to the point where you're like, that was truly unique and amazing and memorable. And Greenland was one of those experiences for sure.
Wow. Well, this is coming from an expert traveler here to go kayaking in Greenland and icebergs.
I absolutely forget your backpacking around Europe experience. Save your money. Go kayaking in Greenland.
I love it. Okay, so I want to get to a few logistics. Did you see any families out there or children out kayaking?
I didn't see any children out there kayaking, and I have thought a lot about your question when you asked if this is family friendly. And I think that it kind of depends on what your family is. We didn't see kids, period, in Greenland, other than the children who lived there. But there's not a lot of tourists. there was like one or two other tourists that we saw when we were there. We always joked that it was like we were on Gilligan's Island. It's like, okay, like the skipper and Mary Jane are accounted for. So there's not a lot of people there to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I think for a lot of families, this would maybe not be a really enjoyable trip for kids, depending on what your kids are into. Like, it's not Disney World. There's not a lot of, like, we didn't see amusement parks and movie theaters and things like that I think a lot of maybe kids gravitate towards. But, if your kids are into hiking and if they like kayaking and that type of stuff, this is a winter wonderland. I mean, you can definitely take your kids there if they are into this. But, we were there in what would be considered like late summer, like just on the cusp of going into autumn. And like on some of the days, it was like a high of 28.
Oh, so, wow.
Right. And so, I know some families who have kids that would love that type of stuff. But then, I think it just depends on what your kids. Yeah, I think it depends on what your kids are into. Like for a lot of kids, like temperatures going from like, 25 to maybe 50 in one day wouldn't be super enjoyable for the kids. But I don't see any part of it being dangerous or not child appropriate. I think it just depends on what your kids are into.
Okay. So when would be the best time to go out to Greenland and kayak through icebergs?
Yeah. Honestly, that late summer, early autumn, so like no later than like the first week of September is that real sweet spot because, and I did not know this, Greenland has a huge mosquito, concentration, I guess is the word for it.
Oh.
So their summer begins maybe like mid to late May. And they talk about like, if you're going to be here in the summertime, you might even need like mosquito masks.
Oh,
like
wow.
if you're going to be out, if you're going to be out like hiking and stuff. And so
I had no idea.
Me either. And so that for me, I was like, great, we're going to come later when that has passed because I did not want to be there for that. But you also don't want to wait too late into the winter because the sea ice gets so thick that you can't go out into it. So I would probably recommend, like mid-August to like the first week of September, that like month there is probably a good time to go to avoid just plague of mosquitoes, but also not when to the sea ice is formed yet.
Great information.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like unpredictability, I guess, that comes with Greenland. I mean, a lot can change really quickly there because of the way the ice just does whatever it wants,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so did you need to plan like your kayak tours in advance before you got there, or could you essentially just fly in and buy that on the spot?
Yeah, you can fly in and buy it on the spot with the knowledge of knowing that you need to have a lot of flexibility with that, because also like with the fog, like if the fog comes in really heavy, it comes in really thick. And so like your tour, if you decide that you just want to go for like one day, then your tour can get canceled really easily, like if there's a big weather change. And so you do need to like give yourself a lot of traveler's grace, I guess, to know that like if you book for a morning trip that, you need to clear out the whole day because the fog settles in, you might get pushed back to like the evening trip, which is what happened to us. And so, like just always have a plan B. But luckily, you're in a stunning area. There's tons of hiking nearby. And so it's really easy if you're willing to be flexible to be like, okay, cool. Like we can't go kayaking right now, but we'll go hiking for 5 or 6 hours and then come back and go kayaking in the evening. And so you don't have to have it planned out in advance, but you do need to have planned out that like if you're going to spend a few days wanting to do that, to have other things in mind you would want to do in the off chance that fog has come in or sea ice is giving you trouble or whatever.
Okay. And you mentioned you stayed in a hostel. What was the cost of that hostel?
It was not cheap. So yeah, like we were in the hostel with a shared bathroom situation, no private bathroom. I think it was about 70 euros a night.
Wow, that is pricey for a
It is
hostel.
pricey for a hostel. It is pricey. We met some girls who were there doing the kayaking thing as well. They were staying in a hotel. So just to kind of like get a feel, we looked up the hotel cost, and it was about $300 a night.
Ooh.
So, I mean, that's what you pay if you're, gonna want a private bathroom and like a hotel bunk bed situation. So, like I said, Greenland was not cheap, not at all.
So was the currency in euros or?
No, it was on the Danish kroner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but they would have a lot of things listed in euros and dollars, I guess, because I guess you have like travelers who show up there and they're like, "What do you mean this isn't on the euro?"
Right.
So
right.
They would help you out. So they would have a lot of things to be like, it's this much kronos, and then like in parentheses it'd be like euro/US dollars. I guess because they assumed that some of us were stupid and they were trying to help us out.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what about the language barrier? Did a lot of people there speak English?
Yes, a ton spoke English. Like I don't think we had a single time of language barrier while we were there. They seemed, like they either spoke Danish and English fluently, or it'd be like Danish, English, and Greenlandic, and a few other languages. So the people there seemed very multilingual.
And was there a tipping culture there?
Not that I saw. So we didn't really see a tipping culture that seemed prominent while we were there. I don't know if it's just because like the prices were just already so high that maybe it was like built into it, but it did not seem to be like when we would fill out things, like on a credit card, there wasn't like a space for like to add a tip on top of it in the places where we were.
Now, what about your food? I mean, if this is such a small community, were there restaurants or did you cook in? Was there a grocery store? What'd you do?
There is a grocery store, which had, it had pretty accessible things that you would think of like in the United States, so they had like frozen food that you could cook in your hostel. They had, cereals and canned pasta and that type of stuff. There were restaurants there as well. There were not many, a couple, 3 or 4.
Okay.
And, like to kind of give you a feel for like the cost, like, we went out to lunch and to buy like just like a pretty basic wrap, just like a chicken veggie wrap was like $28. So,
whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So you buy a lot of groceries.
Got it.
Buy a lot of groceries.
Yeah.
Which is fine because it's not like Greenland is thought of as like the culinary capital on the planet. Like if I was in Italy, I'd be very upset about missing out on the food. But again, I mean, it's not like there's anything in like the Greenlandic dietary staples that's just world famous for like you have to have it before you die, So yeah, like it doesn't seem to be. It's not part of the draw. Like that's not why you go there for the food. So you don't feel remiss buying grocery store food.
All right, it's good to know. Gosh,
it was not cheap.
But still cheaper than Antarctica, which if you're interested in hearing about Antarctica, check out the podcast on experiences you should have on traveling to Antarctica.
Oh, definitely. It's on my queue of things to listen to because that's on my short list right now for sure.
Fabulous. Very fabulous.
Yeah. Have you been?
No, but I'd love to go, but that is one I will really need to save for.
Me too.
I think we covered everything that I wanted to cover.
Okay.
We Thank you for listening to Experiences You Should Have. Please make sure to review Experiences You Should Have on iTunes. If you're listening on iTunes, please subscribe to the podcast. And if you have an idea for a show episode, please message us on the website or use the hashtag EYSH on Instagram. My big bucket list thing I just completed was swimming with hammerheads in the Galapagos last year.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, so now I need to add more to the list and figure out where to be saving for next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would think that because I know you're big into like swimming with sharks and stuff.
Yeah, I
I
love
would
them.
think, yeah, there's some people that are like, like free diving with great whites now. Have you done that?
I have dove with great whites. I haven't free dove with great whites, so
Yeah.
that may need to be added. But I got to spend a week with great whites in Guadalupe,
Oh,
Mexico.
cool. Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I did like the cage diving thing in South Africa, and
Oh,
it was
cool.
beautiful, and they were majestic, and they were amazing. But I was very glad to have had titanium between me and them because
Yeah.
I did not for one second underestimate how powerful those animals
Oh,
were.
yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Well,
Yeah.
true, but I found the great white was actually less curious than the tiger shark, which the tiger
I've heard
sharks
that.
would just come in and they'd be like headed straight for your eyes and then like graze the side of your cheek.
I
But
have heard that. And I'll be honest, like in the cage, they didn't really seem too fussed about us,
yeah,
like, they like swam by and did their thing, but like they didn't seem aggressive at all. And so
right.
yeah, it wasn't so much like I wanted the cage because I thought they were mean or aggressive. It was just more that I was like, these are some of the most powerful creatures on the planet.